Hello and welcome to the Dinosaw for week 3, 2021. Another 7 curious interesting things I saw last week. So let's crack on. So the first one is from virtual CES. So this is the Consumer Electronics Show that's usually in Vegas. Only nobody's going to Vegas this year, clearly. While there were lots and lots of things, it was relatively muted actually. You had to really search for anything coming out of it this year. There were some really interesting things around TV. Now, lots of screens and all that sort of stuff, and foldable things and expandable things, but I just thought it was really interesting the basics are starting to creep in, and hallelujah as well. So you've got LG, for instance, having their basically auto levels on their volume. So we've all been there, so you're watching a commercial channel and the adverts, the volume goes massive, and then you have to then keep fumbling for the remote. So it automatically levels that for you. It's like, why is it taking this long? You've got, for instance, on the right hand side, you've got Samsung and their solar powered remote or solar recharged remote. So they made it with recycled plastics, and it's going to save a huge amount of batteries as well. I mean, you can question, why does it even need batteries when you can probably have a lithium ion cell in there and you wouldn't need to replace the batteries. However, right direction. And then you can also see LG's remote as well, which has NFC Magic Tap. So if your phone has NFC on it, then you can tap on the phone and will then connect your phone to the screen. So you can then share whatever on your phone to the screen or vice versa. So just a really nice way of sort of joining up your experiences. So yeah, TV tech, the basic stuff I think wins this year. So this is a study from Stanford, and this goes back many decades in that there was a study, I think it might have even been a Victorian study, about certain faces can have features that were seen to be criminal, so they could tell whether you were going to be a criminal just by your brow line or whatever it was. Widely debunked. However, a new study coming out of Stanford actually says that they can predict your political bias or persuasion with 72% accuracy. So this also works for things like honesty and intelligence and violence tendencies, apparently. So there are lots of studies that are starting to show, bizarrely, that your face actually can be used as a metric for this. So obviously 72% is high. So if you are in the US and you try to then say, right, you've got really Republican or Democrat, you're going to be a 50-50. So 72% is actually very high, and it outperforms a lot of other tests that they've got as well for trying to predict political persuasions, basically. So obviously, where I would go is, what do you want to do with this, and what could happen with this? And clearly, if you are filtering people based on their faces, and you suspect that somebody is one way or the other, then what are you going to do with that? Now, that's quite a dangerous place to be, because clearly it doesn't seem to be that accurate. However, interesting that that's what they're finding with facial recognition these days. This is quite scary. So this is iPhone 12 and MagSafe, and this is the Henry Ford Institute, and they've found that if you put an iPhone 12 with its MagSafe adapter next to a pacemaker, it will shut down the pacemaker. So the MagSafe comes with the iPhone 12, and it is essentially a magnet where you can clip things to the back of your phone, so chargers, wallets, those sorts of things. Now the only problem is it clips on with a really strong magnet. Now that magnet is also not great for sensitive electronic devices such as defibrillators or pacemakers. So if you have a pacemaker and you have an iPhone 12 in your top pocket, that might not be the smartest place to put it. It's in the T's and C's essentially that this will interfere with sensitive electronic devices. However, there's really interesting. This is quite serious. So I don't know who is going to blink first. Is it going to be the pacemaker technology people, or is it going to be the phone technology people, or is it going to be possibly the top pocket technology people? Put shields in it. I don't know, but that's a really, really dark discovery where phone tech could potentially cost you your life. This is an amazing article, so if you do have a chance to read it, then please do. So this is Jess Joho, and there's an article in Mashable about how she discovered she was bi through TikTok. She was assuming heterosexual for all of her life, and downloaded TikTok. And the way TikTok works is the algorithm starts you with things like, you know, cats and puppies and those sorts of things. And as it then throws in a few extra things to see where it should be going next. And it's a very sort of personal experience, because it's not like social media where it's basically it's you throwing out lots of things. It's really just you consuming things and it trying to give you more and more that you might be into. So very subtle choices that she made along the way, and very subtle things that she liked or watched, led the algorithm to go, right, I think I've got you, and what about this, and what about this? And she made some very, very personal discoveries about herself through an algorithm, which she was not expecting. It's a really, really interesting article, and the power of the algorithm to essentially know you better than you know yourself. So yeah, go and read that. Brilliantly written article as well, very funny. But yeah, the power of the algorithm and TikTok. Samsung also at CES announced their Digital Cockpit 2021, or actually it's Harman who are a part of Samsung. So they're really going heavily for the tech automation of cars, basically. So you'd expect there to be screens and audio, but in their video, their sort of big keynote, that had a huge amount as well in there as well. So they had, you know, LiDAR, and they had directional communications. They also had things like they can communicate with pedestrians via their phone. So if you've got somebody walking out into the street who's not paying attention, then the car can actually communicate via their phone, which I thought was kind of interesting. And also it does things like personal health monitoring. So if you're wearing a fitness device, then it can see whether you're tired or whether there's anything going wrong, or whether you're stressed and those sorts of things. We've seen concepts in the past that say if you're stressed, it takes less or it gives you less of the control of the vehicle, and it assumes more of it, and it knows if you're not stressed and you're totally in control, it can give you more of it. So those sorts of things were really interesting. The second thing I thought was, or the most interesting thing I thought was how we can now theme cars. So the screens, they had a huge sort of dashboard wide screen, and also the actual windscreen itself has a transparent screen in it as well. So one of the uses was gaming. So they recognise that people spend a lot of time in their cars, potentially automated driving, but also parked. So I quite like the idea of saying that if you're a gamer, then this is the gamer's car. This has got all the features for you. If you're a movie buff, then this is the movie buff's car, because it's got all the surround sound and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, might we be seeing the start of marketing cars based on themes that you like, rather than just the technology in the car itself? Impala, if you've been living in a cave or under a rock, then Impala is essentially a Twitter equivalent, I guess. It's a free speech micro messaging application, but it was widely used to organise the sort of the mob attack on the Capitol in Washington, in the US. So clearly that's not great, and all of the major platforms quite rightly delisted it, so you couldn't get it. But if you had it on your phone already, it would still work. So Amazon, who did the hosting, also removed the hosting underneath it, essentially, so it had nowhere to be. It could not run. Just before it was removed essentially from Amazon, some, and I'll do this in air quotes, hackers, because it wasn't really that difficult, basically downloaded all the data. So you're thinking, how is this even possible? So it turns out that, and I've been hearing reports and reading articles for several weeks, just how kind of shakily Impala's put together. Possibly they didn't quite anticipate it being this big, but essentially if you imagine each message is sequential, so there was message 1, message 2, message 3, and all messages on Impala were just sequential. So somebody just wrote a script that said go to message 1 and rip what's there, go to message 2, rip what's there. Now all the data that came down also had things like geolocation tags on it, and some had sort of usernames on it as well. So you're seeing examples here on the screen where people have geolocated the media to the post, for instance. And you've got Carl McDonald, who I follow on Twitter, who's really interesting artist, who's done this for years and years and years, a technologist, mapped all of the Parler messages across America, so you can see where the hotspots are, and also you can actually sort of see where they are and who who was responsible for what. So this is really interesting for law enforcement. And also, if you're on Parler, then you need to be pretty worried right now, because your data is what you thought was safe is now very much public. It's all available on GitHub to download if you really wanted to right now. And finally, this is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who announced this really interesting concept in urban living, or the city planning, I guess. So this is called The Line, and it is 170 kilometers, or 105 miles in old money, and it's a city in a straight line. Now, the way this works is the idea that you do not need roads and you do not need cars in this city, and that is the future vision. So there, underneath this big strip is railway, I guess, and you can travel from one end to the other in 20 minutes. So and each one there's pods all the way along. So each one you can get to everywhere in your pod within 5 minutes, and that's so you don't need to have a car. And if you wanted to go to any other pods, you can travel from one end to the other in 20 minutes. So that's the idea. Now, there's lots of studies around this popped up because of this concept. Apparently you can get about 1 million people per 100 miles. So a city like Chicago, for instance, would actually need to be 300 miles long. So it doesn't really work unless you stack lots of cities next to each other, and that's just how they work, which is clearly not going to happen. But who knows, and let's see if this could work. And yeah, just a really interesting concept, and just to try and get rid of cars and try and get rid of roads, which I think is a noble aim. So there you have it. So that's it for this week. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week.